Alright, so we're back out here in the shop, and I am going to dive into this transmission now. Got it out on the bench, disconnected from the engine, and, well, technically I've already started on it. This is my second attempt at this video. I didn't get too far, though. Mainly the big issue was, so I was spraying a bunch of brake clean and whatnot, so I had my vent fan, and things particularly loud, so I was thinking about doing a voiceover version of this, but yeah, I'm not Barry, so I'll leave that to him. That's his specialty. So I'm better at talking through things as I do them. So here is where I am so far. I removed the top plate, the side sensors, the rear plate, and then I undid the bolts for the tail shaft. And it does not want to let go. Usually a couple whacks with a brass drift and a hammer will pop this loose for me, but shit, I even knocked the roll pins out. The bottom one's out, this one's through all the way. I knocked them out of the way, and it still just doesn't want to pop. This seal, or whatever they use to glue it, is holding exceptionally well on this transmission. Usually they just pop out, no problem. But it looks like I'm probably just gonna have to go and pull the whole transfer assembly, which you can do. It makes things a little more difficult to do it that way. But we are removing all these perimeter bolts. It is there's a few of them. What, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those. So we'll get those 8 removed, and then hopefully the transfer assembly will just pop out. This guy's going to require a manual approach. Now, for the most part, we don't really have to worry about, since, oops, there goes that. So that was a little spacer washer that I put in there, because I made this lifting plate for moving everything around. So moving the engine and transmission as an assembly, it was easier to grab it here and then the front lifting point on the engine. So I made this little lifting point to move it around, made it easier. So these bolts we are going to want to save, or going to need to save, because we will be reusing them on the replacement back cap, is what it will be. It'll be a back cap instead of a transfer and tail shaft, because we're converting this to a 2-wheel drive. I've got this pan underneath of it because even though we drained it from the drain plug on the differential, there's always seems to be a bunch of oil that gets left up here in this transfer assembly. Although usually when I rebuild these, most of the time it's because the nut on 5th gear works itself loose, so you essentially lose 5th gear, the ability to get to it. So a lot of times I just pop this whole assembly off the back here, put in your nut, stake it down, and call it a day. Usually when I do that, I will have the transmission standing up on its nose. But even then, you still get a little bit of a fluid loss. All right, there we go. Now she's bleeding. Tell you what, that gear oil does not look healthy. Okay, so it's been draining for a little bit. I got the transmission secured a little better. It's not great, it's still a little wobbly, but should stay place long enough for us to enact the next portion of our mission here. So we are going to pop off this back part of the transmission. So the transfer assembly ta-da. Okay, so here is our transfer assembly. From here, we pull out this guy. So this guy will, this guy lives right there. We're gonna pull him out. Before we do that, inside, so yeah, when this part comes off, you take the top plate off, and then right in here, there will be this shaft running up through there. And then this guy will be on that shaft. And there is a 10mm head, 6mm bolt, this little guy, that lives right there. Actually, it's a little pin. See the end of it that goes in that hole. And then that, the top of this pokes up into this guy. This guy right here is your reverse lockout. So this keeps you from going and, oops, as I just threw it around. This guy here keeps you from shifting from fifth to reverse, or third to reverse. Basically, you have to bring the shifter back into neutral, and then you have to go all the way over and back to go into reverse. So keeps you from doing a money shift into reverse. And then down there, that's our center differential that we are no longer needing. So this whole piece right here will be replaced with this guy right there. And as a result, oh, no, I didn't actually notice that before. They've got bronze bushings for the shifter, as opposed to like just riding in the aluminum like the original. And then you've got these are for your switches. So yeah, the two switches, two electrical switches, the reverse lockout, and then the shifter will transfer from this into this. Of course, we'll get we'll get into that and cover that all once we do the assembly part of this. So yeah, now that we've got this far down, we got to take all this apart, and then we got to split the case. You see it's actually split right here. So we lay it on its side, we undo all these bolts and nuts and stuff on, and then we crack the case in half. That's the real fun part. Okay, so here's where the real fun starts. So we've got to split the case. And unfortunately, I have not gotten around to... I wanted to build an adapter for my engine stand so I can bolt transmissions to it and work on them as needed. I have not gotten around to doing that yet though. So it's on the list. For now, we're gonna work on the bench with this one. So when doing stuff like this, the best tool that you can use is this guy right here. I take pictures of freaking everything. All the angles, that way I can see where all the bolts and all the fasteners and brackets and anything that I might at a later point go, where does this go? I'll have pictures on my phone that I can go back and reference. Even better, I will, since my phone is automatically uploaded to the cloud and everything is saved there, I can actually just put it on my garage monitor and look at stuff there in 55 inches instead of having to look at the screen and blow up several times. I can just pull up my pictures on the computer in here and reference back to them. So don't be afraid to take pictures, like lots of them from every possible angle if you can. Especially helpful for people like my age that your memory is starting to disappear. I haven't quite gone full Biden, but hopefully that'll never happen to me. I can still, for the most part, take an entire engine or transmission apart and remember where every single fastener goes. The other really helpful part is having a manual. That definitely is something worth getting. Luckily, Subaru is such a large and helpful community. You can access essentially every single service manual, factory service manual, online for free with very little actual searching. We've got entire forums dedicated to just sharing information like that. So yeah, let's crack this coconut. I can't go as deep or do as much as I want. Like, I can't get into this bearing because I don't have the 35mm to take this nut off. But it's in the mail, so it'll be here, unfortunately, like in a week. So this will just be a teardown video so that I can actually get it done in time, or uploaded in time. All right, that's enough with my jibber jabbering. Let's start cracking. If you get the chance to buy a tool, get these. They're an impact socket with an integrated wobble built in, and they are indispensable. They're one of my go-to tools for almost everything. Okay, so if you are wondering, that doesn't actually list any order. It just says separate the transmission case into right and left cases by loosening 17 coupling bolts and nuts. Okay, so let's start with the 12s. Another reason for recording this is so that I can have a record of which bolts go where. For the most part, it's hard to really screw it up because they're really only a couple of lengths. If you have a long bolt where a short one should be, it becomes very evident. It's too quiet in here. It's unusually quiet in here. I also work with a radio on or a podcast or something. So we're at this point where we've got better part of half of the bolts out of the case. So these are all these have 12 millimeter hex. They're an 8 millimeter bolt. Most people call the bolts by the hex head, but that's not accurate. These are 8 millimeter bolts. They use a 12 millimeter socket to take them out. And the next set of bolts on this transmission are 10 mil. And they use a 14 millimeter. We have an escapee. So for the Volkswagen, both of these brackets are going away. We don't need them for the Volkswagen. So yeah, one of the brackets, so the upper one was for the pitch stopper. That's what keeps the engine from pitching up when you accelerate forward. So since this is going to be turned around the other way, when you accelerate forward, it's going to want to pitch down on the engine side. But your engine mounts will take that up. And then you have a big fat transmission mount on the very back of the tail shaft, or on the tail. There's no tail shaft of the transmission. So that will take up so you don't need the pitch stopper. And then the other one was for a cable clutch. But the Vanagon doesn't use a cable clutch, it uses a hydraulic clutch. So we are going to put a hydraulic slave cylinder on this to operate the clutch. Luckily, some Subarus came with hydraulic clutches, so it already has the attachment point to put a slave cylinder on here. Okay, so what I do when it comes to splitting these is I like to drive out the roll pins. Not roll pins, they're block pins. Alignment pins, however. These will sometimes get seized in and it'll hold the case together. That one came out really easy though, so. Shit, yeah. We want to go the other way. So that's the side the diff will be on. We want the side the diff is on currently to be the downside. I usually use a bottle jack. I'll stick a bottle jack inside the bell housing. But my bottle jack went missing a couple years ago. I think somebody liked it more than I did. Oh, shit. I'm a dummy. I totally forgot these guys. There are the 4 bolts that hold the rear bearing. So there is actually a hole in this shift fork to get in there. And technically you don't have to pull all four. I at a very minimum like to get the bottom ones loosened up. Ta-da! Yee. Oh boy. That is not good looking. Alright, so here we go. This is the Subaru 5-speed all-wheel drive transmission. At least the transmission portion. So power comes in from our engine here, comes down our main shaft, and then these are all our various gears. Starting from, so small input, big output means that that's a high gear. So that'll be first. And so we move our shifter to the left and push up, and it locks in first gear. And now our power goes from here to here, where it's locked onto the counter shaft, where it sends power up to this spline here, and then this spline goes into our center differential, and then the center differential differentiates the power between the front and the rear, and then it goes out the front differential and the rear differential as needed. And then we come back and we lock into second gear. So now our power is coming down the main shaft through second gear, out the counter shaft, center differential, out the front. And then we go third. Third will be not as easy for me to get to because it's between there. So now we have got third gear. So power now is coming down our main shaft to this gear set. And we come back here. And now we have fourth. So fourth gear is now coming down to here, and then down and out. And then we've got up, and that locks in fifth. So this gear set right here is locked in, and that'll be our fifth. Pull this back. Pulling this back locks this gear down here. That's really hard to see. And then that is a gear-to-gear contact, which is why it makes that kind of clunking noise. And then what that does is it slots a gear between these two gears. So if you notice, when everything was spinning, these two gears aren't actually making contact. They're going past each other, but they're not making contact. That's because this gear here slots between them. And when you put another gear in the mix, it reverses the rotation. So if we keep going forward, you can see the gear is going back. So the front bearing's not horrible. It's a little rough, but this rear one, yeah, see, that's not supposed to be like that. So at a minimum, we're gonna have to replace that main shaft bearing. It's okay. So when taking these apart, you've got to be really careful with, there is a shim or shims back here on this bearing. You don't want to mess up that shim. That's what sets your valve lash, your gear lash, or so your pinion depth. Changing this shim changes how deep your pinion sits. And if you mess that up, then it can mess up your differential. So yeah, there's the reverse idler gear. Like I said, that one slides forward and slots between the two reverse gears, and that reverses the countershaft. So this is where I'm going to end this video, because I've got to go do some poking around. Okay, so here we are. We are done with disassembly. The transmission is completely torn apart, but in the meantime, I've got a shit ton of cleaning to do. So yeah. Until then, hopefully this was informative. You learned something. I learned some things for sure. And yeah, until next time, stay safe, have fun, peace.